Hi, I'm Jazz Tangcay, Senior Artisans Editor at Variety, and I'd like to welcome you all to the premiere Array Crew Below the Line FYC conversation. Before I get started, Array Crew is committed to building an equitable workforce in the entertainment industry, and that takes more than words. Movements need systems and infrastructure in order to truly take hold. Ava DuVernay and a women-led team developed Array Crew, the first database of its kind, to ensure that studio executives and hiring managers are able to access a robust pipeline of qualified women and people of color to staff their television and film crews. Array Crew partners include Amazon, Apple, Disney, Fox, Lionsgate, NBC Universal, Netflix, Sony, Viacom CBS, and founding partner Warner Media. You can learn more and sign up at arraycrew.com. So without further ado, let me introduce this premier incredible panel. We have costume designer from Genius Aretha, Jennifer BRYAN, hair department head of the Underground Railroad, Lawrence Davis, costume designer of Dickinson, Jennifer MOELLER, composer of the Queen's Gambit, Carlos RAFAEL Rivera, casting director for The Boys, Robert ULRICH, and costume designer of Star Trek Discovery, GERSHA PHILLIPS. Hello and welcome to you all.
Thank you for having us.
I am so excited to hear from you, and I'm so excited that you're all here today. So let's just dive right on in. You know, so much of costume designing is about immersing yourself in the period. And Jennifer, for season 2 of Dickinson, how do you immerse yourself into the late 1850s? Talk about that. Let's hear your story.
Well, it is the first step is really jumping in and getting into the period. And luckily for me, the late 1850s, 1860s is a period where photography is really starting to take off. It's becoming something that's more accessible to everyday people, not just the sort of wealthy. And so that's one place I started, was like looking at all the pictures and all the portraits, especially, there's quite a few portraits, and looking very carefully at all the little details, the buttons, the trims, the collars, the hairstyles, all those sort of things, just getting into it. I also really always start with what's real. So I look at real clothes, open them up, see how they're made. I spent a lot of time up at the Dickinson homestead, which is a museum in Amherst, Massachusetts, where in a home where Emily Dickinson grew up. And in a neighboring town, Deerfield, there is a really beautiful museum that has real clothes from the period, from the area. So I visited and took a look and looked inside. You have to always turn them inside out to see how they're made. There's this publication that was put out in Philadelphia called the Godey's Ladies Handbook, which had Parisian and Venetian fashions. And that would be something that I looked to for Sue's clothes for the season, because she's somebody who's a little more fashion forward and would be looking at those kind of magazines.
I love that. And GERSHA, what about for you? How do you immerse yourself in the future that is Star Trek Discovery, that we haven't even been, you know, we haven't even lived through yet?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I look at the Star Trek legacy, like what's already been created within the world of Star Trek. And then I look to other stuff, either sci-fi films, to see what they're doing. You know, I've mentioned that I loved Logan's Run, at least the version of Logan's Run that's in my brain, as opposed to what is really there. And Space Odyssey 1999, obviously the other 2001, all of those things, you know, you look at, and I've sort of honed in on different things from different shows. So that's really what it is. And then the other thing is just looking at what fashion and what clothing is doing for the future. And also, you know, taking notes from things like, you know, 3D printing and what's happening with those types of things. And you know, the idea that the body would be scanned, the clothing would probably be printed. And now that we're even like, you know, in season 3, we moved 1,000 years past that. So what are clothes doing? Like this idea that they would be morphing onto the body, or they would be holographic, or whatever they would be, like those kinds of things, of looking at ideas of what clothing would be in the future. You know, that's sort of like where we're going to now. So
I love that. Jennifer, you know, for you, you've had to recreate, you know, Aretha Franklin's most famous gowns that are well photographed and documented. What was that like for you? And what were the challenges of, you know, creating those gowns and yet having your own creative stamp on some of those looks that were so incredibly portrayed by Cynthia Erivo?
Thank you. Yeah, it's I had to kind of meld those two avenues of your own creativity or my own creativity, bringing that forward, and also replicating dresses and, you know, things that she wore that are very well documented. And those sometimes at times prove to be a bit of a challenge because the research, as Jennifer was saying, the research is there, but in the earlier part of the 50s and 60s, like in magazines, you didn't have digital, so you had to rely on old grainy photographs that really don't give you much in terms of accurate detail. And there were a couple of times when I would look at a dress that we wanted to copy that Aretha Franklin wore. Every photograph would present it in a different tone, a different hue. The fabric would look like one thing other than another. We found a pattern that we didn't see in earlier photos. So it took what I would call forensic research when you have to duplicate or replicate garments that have been already recorded.
Yeah. And Lawrence, what about for you on working on the Underground Railroad and, you know, showing those natural hairstyles that we see on screen that for so long, you know, we haven't always seen. So talk about your work on the series.
You know, a lot of my inspiration came, of course, when I walked through the costume department. You know, they set the tone for me, actually. I make sure that on any project that I work on, that's one of my favorite walks because it helps me to get into what's being worn, what's current, and it just sets the tone of the entire project. So besides Googling this and Googling that, I'm only finding black and white pictures because it's so long ago, and that's my inspiration. But also seeing it all come together, you know, just makes it all more authentic. If it's walking through costumes or props or anything like that, I just pull all my inspiration from other departments as well.
Love that. And Carlos, what about for you when it came to scoring the music for the Queen's Gambit? Obviously, we had the novel that existed, but, you know, I read somewhere that you looked up chess. What does chess sound like? Like, talk about bringing that sound to life.
Oh, it was sheer terror. I didn't know how I was going to do it because when Scott Frank sent me the email back in April of 2018, I ended up downloading the novel by Walter Tevis, and it's a short read, it's a quick read, and I finished reading it and I was just really scared because Mr. Tevis mentions classical music a lot throughout, and he compares the game itself to classical music, and that to me was one of the big challenges because I felt that the game is old. And so the music has to kind of make a reference to a kind of older style. More importantly, the game is comprised of a move and a counter move. So the idea of using counterpoint in music of a line and then a call and a response, and using imitation as a way of kind of getting us into the brain or the mind or heart of whoever's playing the game. That was the biggest challenge, and it took a long time to find a way out. I mean, I wrote so many versions of the first game that Scott sent me when he had assembled it. And by the third or fourth submission, he called me and he's like, "Carlos, you're scoring the wrong movie." so that was a note to get from a director. And thankfully we found a way out. So I'm very, very grateful to be able to talk to you and be here in this amazing company today. So thank you.
And it's an incredible score. Robert, I'm going to jump to you for The Boys. Eric, the showrunner for the series, you know, had a list of, you know, his principal actors. How do you help shape that vision and bring those characters to life? Like, talk about the casting process for The Boys.
Well, every situation, every show is slightly different because it is always dependent upon your showrunner, your creator, and you ultimately my job is to do a great job, but it's also to make them happy and show their vision. Luckily on The Boys, Eric Kripke is incredible. And what he's so good at is he knows what he wants. However, he's completely open to whatever I may bring him. And I've had I've been very blessed. I worked with Ryan Murphy, was exactly the same way. Austin Winsberg's the same way, where they know what they want, which is great, but they've made me feel very comfortable to bring them whoever I think is right for the part.
Absolutely. And I want to jump back to what Lawrence said about his favorite walk, as department head is going through costume. So I'd love to hear from all of you what your favorite department walk is. Gersh, let's start with you.
I love to walk through the sets. Starting on Star Trek Discovery I think it's like one of the first times I've worked on a series where there were so many sets. And I just remember in particular walking on this sarcophagus ship, the Klingon ship. There was this amazing, beautiful set. It was just fantastic. And getting to walk through that and just, I don't know, it was so otherworldly and different that it really helped me to envision what these guys could be and what their journey could be. So that was really awesome. And also, the first on the Discovery and the captain's chair. I mean, come on, what could be better than those things? So, they were all, the sets they're amazing here. They're really, really mind-blowing, incredible. So that helps me a lot. And the art department is where I go for my information. So
I was piggybacking Gershon and saying the art department, production design, absolutely walking through those sets, going into art department and seeing all of their boards on the wall, to me is just like, getting access to the the forecasting of what I'm going to have to deal with and what my clothes are what setting there's going to be. So it's one of my favorite things, just to walk in and see all those huge boards with the vision of the show laid out in front of me. It's very, very encouraging and stimulating.
Yeah. It's like stepping into the world. You have this feeling that you're stepping into the world.
Yes.
Show, which is really quite fabulous.
Totally.
Yeah. Jennifer, did you want to add to that?
The same for me. It's going to the art department and walking on the sets. And luckily here on Dickinson, the production designer Neil Patel and I both started in theater, and we actually worked together on productions prior to Dickinson. And I think in theater there's this maybe I'm sort of learning, but maybe more so than in TV. There's more collaboration between the departments early on, and that was something that I think was sort of special about season 2 of Dickinson, and us coming together very early on and sort of like setting the stage together. And I think that comes from our theater background.
And Carlos, I mean, as a composer, like talk about your composers and editors are often in their suite. So talk about, I guess, your favorite work that helps bring that sound together for you.
Well, for me, like writing is research. Like if I get any job, I start thinking about what stories have been told that are very similar in line. So the first thing I did is watch chess documentaries, chess films, but what I really enjoy is actually collaborating with the sound department, and because we are laying the canvas upon which the story is told, and I have to work with sound. Sound will always win, and music will always get taken out because dialogue is the melody, right? So I love getting to collaborate with the team, and I've been very blessed to work with Wiley Stateman, who we call Obi-Wan Kenobi, for a reason. If you IMDb him, you'll see it. But he's worked on like all the Quentin Tarantino films since like Kill Bill, and he's a master at what he does. So anytime he calls me with Carlos, I have a couple ideas, I'm like, please go ahead. It's one of the greatest privileges, and we get to really help tell the story through sound. And when we have a scene, we will discuss, what should take over. Should sound take over because we have a constant clock going, or does music take over and the clock kind of gets a little bit put behind? And that's just one example of many that I felt very blessed to be able to work with Wiley on. So sound is everything. If I could do this all over again, I would have done sound design, not film music or not music, for sure. I love it so much. It's crazy.
Revelation right there. And this, I'm sure the sound design door is still open for you to venture in one day.
Not for my wife. Not for my wife. She will not let me go back. And I talked to her. I was like, honey, should I? She's like, you're no, because music already has been tough enough. So,
Robert, what about for you? What's your favorite walk? Let's hear.
But on the boys, on the pilot, because it started in LA, what I found very useful was seeing the costume designs of the superhero costumes. And they were so beautiful and fun. And so that informed me, seeing those designs as to, because before that it was just, I mean, I'd seen the comics, but still seeing the actual costume designs was very informative. And I wish that I was there so I could be, you know, it's with casting, it's often strange because you're usually not on the lot, you're usually separated. So your relationships, even before COVID, tended to be by phone.
So I'm gonna switch lanes. I wanna hear a little bit about your journey. So much, you know, you're all department heads, and so much of the journey, so much about this town is about no, getting the door shut in your face because there's somebody else that either got a job because of a friend, for whatever reason that no is. So what would you say to those crew members out there watching, to anybody watching, and the advice you would give them about just getting back up again and getting in through that door? Lawrence, I'm going to start with you.
I'm a firm believer of what's for me is for me and what's not is not for me. And I think that just me personally learning how to say no to things that I don't think I'm a good fit for or that doesn't resonate with me is one thing that I go by. I know that a lot of people, you know, are desperate for such a project or whatever, but I think that every project is not a good fit for everybody. You know, I'm a firm believer of what's for me is for me, and that's my approach.
GERSHA, what about for you?
I think when I have been disappointed by a project, I mean, it usually takes me, sometimes it depends on how the project and what it was exactly. I might have been really gutted about it. But you know, it's similar to what Lawrence was just saying, that, you know, you just have to sort of come to terms with that wasn't your project, you know, and so my advice would be, you know, it's sort of like believing in that and believing in yourself and in your ability to attract what you need and what you're going to resonate with and what you're actually going to be good at. Because I think that's all really important. You know, it's really funny because I remember being interviewed on a film with Jeff Bird, and I didn't get the movie, and then they came back to me because it wasn't working out with the costume designer and they wanted me to do it, but I had been hired on another show already, so I couldn't work with them. And then now 20 years later he's directing an episode of Star Trek Discovery, so we're finally working together. So it's kind of, you know, I mean, those things kind of happen, and it feels really great to be working with him now. So maybe it's the right time, and back then it just wasn't. And, you know, the film that I did go do, I really loved what I did in the end, and not did his. So at the time I was gutted, but then, you know, it turned out to be the right thing. So it's kind of interesting how things work out in the end, you know. So I guess, you know, that idea that what's for us is for us and what doesn't happen, you just have to let it go eventually. You know, mourn, I guess, and then let it go.
And Robert, so much of your day is about seeing, you know, hundreds walk through your door or, you know, show up on your Zoom screen and saying no. What advice would you give to those who get the no and getting back up again and building that resilience?
I agree with what's been said, and I totally agree with what Lawrence said, that it is all about, I believe that if it's yours, it's yours. For me, it's been different because I'm one of those people that thinks he'll never work again the second a job's over. And this has been for the entire time I've been in the business. I think I'll never get hired again. So for me, it's been a lot about not just taking whatever's offered and knowing that if I take something that I don't really want or believe in, that something else will come along. I have to continually tell myself that.
Jennifer, Brian, did you want to add to that? Getting back up and being resilient.
Yes, one of the things I think also advice I would give to people starting out is sometimes we think, oh my God, I don't know any, because Hollywood, the industry is such, it's so laden with contacts and who you know, that sometimes we don't realize that we know more people than we know. So I have this, and it's a thing that I've started doing way back when I started working, and when I moved out from New York to LA, and I thought, oh, nobody knows me, that kind of thing. It turned out that I had what I call a map of relationships. And it right here, like just us today meeting, each one of us here on this Zoom, and those of us who are listening, your relationships have increased exponentially by the people that you hear and see here on this Zoom. So for me, using the map of relationships, looking at who you know, how you know them, how it's connected, that to me is a very practical and useful way to utilize the thing in the industry that we complain about, because, and then we make it a tool. That I think is a good way to go, good start. And yes, in Jamaica, we have the very same saying, Lawrence, what's for you is for you, and what's not for you is not for you. And I live by that, believe me, because I've been disappointed in shows that I didn't get. And then turned out that either the project wasn't so great for all, after all, or the thing that I got instead was much better than the thing that I wanted.
Absolutely.
I agree with that completely.
Jennifer, what about you? What advice would you give to those out there who get no's?
Said it pretty beautifully before me. But I will also say that when you find those people with whom you have whom you admire, or with whom you have a very strong artistic connection, it's important to really hold on to those relationships, because you never know where they're going to lead you, years from now or tomorrow.
And Carlos, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. We had a producer at where I teach at the Frost School of Music as a guest, and like 2-3 years ago, and his name's Salam Remy. He's amazing, and his advice was something that I needed to hear then, and he said, "You are not your work," and that just really resonated with me, because I've been always like, as we get rejection, as we lose opportunities, you think you always are going to take it personal. I always take it personally, but I've learned to process it in a way to realize that this is what I'm doing, and this is what's being critiqued or criticized or rejected, and it's not me. What I am made of is like my better half, my family, all these other things. And the work is, once you kind of learn to try to remove, I don't think you can ever successfully be objective, but you can try. And knowing that saying is with me every day, you're not your work. And it just really personally has helped me kind of get through a lot, and hopefully is encouraging to those who are starting out.
So let's hear about some initiatives that you're doing to help those that are starting out but want to get into your specific field. And, now that you've given the advice, like, what are you doing as department heads?
For me, one of the things that I am very conscious of doing is that, we are all of our individual crafts and the industry as whole is really kind of a lockdown from us being a union type industry, which makes it difficult for people on the outside to get in. And of course, the union protects us and gives us benefits and makes sure we're not being abused in the workplace and all of that. But the downside of it, it's also very hard to get past that door. In the costuming world, one of the things that we do, and I actively do this, is to bring people on as PAs, production assistants in the department. Granted, it's entry level and the pay is not great, but what it does is that it gives them a hands-on experience of what my job's like, what the costumer's job is like, what key costume and other departments around them. And it also thins out a lot of people who thought they may have been suited for this type of work, and to discover that they're not. But that's one of the things that I consciously try to do, to bring people in, expose them. And if you still have that fire in your belly after the 14, 16-hour days, then maybe this is something for you.
Carlos, were you going to say something too?
Yeah, just only because I've been teaching. I got very lucky to get to do this because I've always been teaching. I was teaching at USC in the popular music program, and I've been teaching at the University of Miami in the popular music program, and now the film scoring or media scoring program. And so teaching is awesome because I get an opportunity to share all my mistakes. I'm telling them all of the things, all of the walls I've hit. I'm telling people that are like 18 to 24 or something, and they're about maybe half of them aren't going to listen anyway. Because at that age, if we all remember, the world was our oyster and we could do anything, and then life happens at us, right? So, but I love the opportunity of getting to share all of those mistakes that I'm making and try to bring the real world experience to the room, and so they can take it from a pragmatic point of view, as opposed to talking about great composers or great scores only. You want to really get into the process and the craft itself, as was mentioned earlier. It's all about the craft, getting better at this thing. And anyway,
Lawrence, what about you? What initiatives are you doing as department head to help open the door for those coming after you?
One advantage that that I found was working in Georgia. It's a right to work state. So there are a lot of people who get an opportunity to come on set because we have to kind of hire them when we don't have other people available. So that's been an advantage that I've seen for a lot of my hair people that have worked in background. And they kind of know after a 12-hour day, like Jen said earlier, if they really, really want to be a part of it. And it's one of those things where I encourage them to definitely, think deeply about what they're doing and what they want to do before diving in and making a mess of it. But it's been an advantage that I had, so I can actually call people who've called me and reached out to me and have not had that union experience. And I've been able to bring them on, and they kind of stayed and some didn't, but it was definitely an advantage for me being there.
GERSHA?
Hi. I guess, I always try to hire a diverse crew and bring up new people and train them, et cetera. But I've also joined our diversity committee in our union. And, through that, we are in the process of setting up some outreach programs and some mentorship programs that we're doing through that. And I also did, there's another association here called Inclusive Stylists who bring up young BIPOC people into the business too, and they're training them. And so I did a mentorship program with them and sat down and talked to a group of them and ended up hiring a couple of them actually for our season. So that was really great. So yeah, just anything I can do. I'm always being asked by people for help and things like that. And I just try to be helpful and bring up the next generation because they're the ones who are going to lead it pretty soon. So it's going to be great.
And Jennifer, what about for you?
I'm always trying to create a diverse crew, and especially hiring at the supervisory level, right? Because if I hire people of color or women at that level, then I find that the rest of the crew follows suit. So I'm always trying to do that. But also, just sometimes with all the craziness of it all, it's so comforting to just have people around you that have your friends and people you've worked with before. And I'm always challenging myself to try to bring new people in, different people, just to expand that, because I feel like the work is better, the environment is better. It's just better, to have more turnover and to have, fresh faces in the office and on the crew.
Love that. So, we're talking about hiring practices, and we've got, Array Crew was set up in February of this year, which is such an incredible initiative, putting action, where the mouth is, as opposed to like just being all talk. And we've seen that a lot in our industry. Like how do you think the industry landscape is changing so that, and opening up more doors so that you can actually say, so if you're looking to hire a diverse crew, you can go to something like Array and find the diverse crew that you are looking to hire?
Well, I can give you a firsthand experience with Array. I discovered, that Ava had made this database, and I signed on during I guess, well, it was definitely during the COVID period. And I had first of all, I was amazed that there were so many of us in terms of the diversity of us within all of our crafts. Had no idea. So that was a very pleasant surprise. And then I personally got an inquiry for a project from a studio. And in the email, the producer said that he saw my credits and, info on Array. Unfortunately, I was already working and I couldn't, follow up on a position, but it was very gratifying because what this database does and how I think it's, the landscape is changing, and we all know it's not changing fast enough. But one of the things it's doing is shutting down that excuse that we all have heard. Oh, I didn't know that we wanted a Black or a BIPOC or a diverse person to, on our crew, a production designer or whatever, but we didn't know where to look. We didn't know that there are any. That is starting to shut down. So once that, that excuse, which is really ridiculous, is eliminated by having databases like this, like having, sources of information where to find people. I think we'll start to see a change because they're going to run out of excuses.
Let's talk about the industry landscape changing. I think, as Jennifer said, it is changing slowly, and we've got Array crew out there, so, proving that there are BIPOC, people of color crew members that you can hire compared to the no's that we've all been hearing that they don't exist. Talk about your experience and how you feel the landscape is changing to create more opportunities. Robert, let's start with you.
I was fortunate that when I started casting, I didn't know anything. I was the most unqualified. I just should never have been hired. But my first boss, who was my mentor and is still my close friend, is Reuben Cannon. And he was really at that time, I think, the only Black casting director in the business. And I joined him right after he had done The Color Purple. And so my training in the business and all my database and everything was different than the average white kid starting in the business because my boss was Black. I agree that it's changing. I don't think it's changing quickly enough. But in the last year even, or 2 years, I think it's very different than it's been for the last 30 years.
Lawrence, what about for you? What changes have you seen? How is the industry changing?
One thing that I've seen, and I thank my actors for speaking up for what they want to see in the trailer, and that has helped a lot because of them having a voice and saying, I need someone who can handle my type of hair or my type of skin or whatever have you. So I would definitely say having actors speak up and say exactly what they want has really changed and made doors open for a lot of people.
That's actually something that is now just recently been in the negotiations for an actor.
Yeah.
If I have an actor that, they'll want that in their contract so that people just don't say, oh, we'll take care of it. Then they get to the set and there's not somebody that can do their hair. They're now dealing with that up front in the negotiations, which I think it's because things are changing. The actors are, like Lawrence said, are feeling more comfortable in being vocal about it.
Talk about that change, because that was such an issue. I think as Robert and you both said, a few years ago, that confidence of actors speaking up, they want somebody to do, talk about the hair, how the hair department has evolved over the last few years.
I definitely, working on the Underground Railroad, which was interesting, I had 2 British actors come in the trailer, and meeting them for the first time, they were like, well, I've never seen an African-American department head on a project in the UK. And I thought it was really strange, to hear that, but I definitely know that it's been one of the things where I definitely know that if I have a trailer that's diverse and everybody has a chair to sit in, that it's going to be a smooth ride for everybody involved. I think that what we have trusted in the past was people saying, oh, I can handle this or I can handle that. You know, of course, the ball was dropped when the opportunity presented itself. But just having the voice and saying exactly what we want and what we need is just making it all better for all of us. And like I said, I always like to have a diverse trailer so that everybody can be accommodated.
Jennifer?
I think it's important. I will say that one of the things I have noticed too is, you know, we're all doing our part to try to improve things. But I will say that I have noticed that things are really only going to get better when the stories that we're telling are the better stories, right? And I'm starting to see that start to happen. I'm starting to see these stories that are not just the same story over and over again.
Working on a show like Star Trek Discovery, you know, where we have a Black lead, we have a Black executive producer, and we have such a diverse cast. And so now our crew is becoming diverse. You know, we shoot in Canada, so there are not a lot of Black department heads here. But we have right now Black hair, makeup, and costume designs. We're all Black women, actually, which is kind of very cool. So, I mean, yes, I look forward to the time when we don't have to talk about these things, that they are commonplace, right? I mean, it's definitely, you know, unfortunately that something like what had to happen last year happened, and it created this sort of this crazy explosion into what we're experiencing now. And, you know, if you're a Black, any department head of any kind, you're in high demand. If you're a Black actor, you're in high demand right now. So it's kind of a really weird place to be. And then, you know, what will the fallout for that? Where will the pendulum swing and where will it land? You know, what does that look like eventually? You know, all of those things to be taken into consideration. But you know, as things move forward and as more films and more stories are told that are more diverse, I really look forward to this you know, evolving of what's happening now and where, you know, what's going to happen and how it can happen. I think it's really amazing. And there's so many young people coming up that are, you know, talented and are ready.
And Carlos, I want to go back to what you said. You know, you obviously teach music, and you know, the one thing that there's a statistic out there, like the women composers, I think the number of women composers is something like less than 5%. It's such a low number that scored like blockbuster movies over the last few years. You know, and there are women musicians out there, there are women composers out there. Like, what would you say to them, to the women out there and the women musicians who aspire to be composers, and what are you seeing in the world of music?
I'm seeing the change. It's obviously slowly happening, but you know, female composers, women composers that have come out in the last few years. Pinar Toprak has been working fantastically. She scored a Marvel movie. Laura Cartman, who's been working forever in the industry, has just, you know, scored a fantastic show. I forgot, Lovecraft Country, and very high prominent shows. As far as those, I mean, also Lolita Ritmanis has been working for a very long time, and she studied under Rachel Portman. And so we have kind of what feels like a big movement of empowering female composers. And there's an Alliance for Women Film Composers as well that has been going on for the last few years, I believe started by or co-started by Laura Cartman as well. So I've been actually noticing this from the sidelines and encouraging it, of course. You know, as far as the students that are coming in, we have very much a diverse group of students that are coming in from different countries and different genders. And, you know, it's a change that I'm happy to see. But definitely, I think, as GERSHA said, you know, I'm looking forward to the place that, you know, people asking me about by being Latino, how, you know, things happen. Just the conversation isn't part of the conversation anymore. We're just talking about work, all of us, you know. That's important, I think, you know. And even culturally speaking, I grew up in Central America, and I grew up in just thinking that all of you and all of the actors and film composers and whatever, all these people and directors were born in a different island, like they're from another world. I never thought I'd be moving to Miami or to United States or even Los Angeles, as I lived there for a long time, and getting to meet people. And culturally, that just, you know, it's sort of a system by which there is a class, you know, system. So feeling when people say speaking up, I think it's a bigger deal culturally to actually practice the speaking up part, because I certainly would have never done it. You know, when I started meeting people, I was like, oh my God, you know, I was just always thinking that they were not human. And to break through that took a long time. And, you know, I'm still working through it, but I think it's important to talk about that. How saying empowering people to speak up as opposed to, you know, breaking through their cultural upbringing to break through and speak up is a longer journey, I think.
I actually just wanted to add on to that too. I think, you know, seeing Ruth Carter win the Oscar, you know, was such a game changer for us. And then the team that won this year too, from Irene, you know, to see these new people win that are like me, and I can relate to them. I can see myself doing those things at some point in time. It's the same thing with film. You know, I think so many people say, especially of minorities, say, we didn't know that I could have a career in film. I didn't know I could be a costume designer. And I feel like, you know, that's what the outreach is going to be so important of, is letting, you know, going into these schools, letting people know that you can have this type of career. It's a great career. It's available to you. I think those are the things that are really important. And I think Array, I believe that's one of their sort of mandates that they're doing as well, which is really great.
I wish there were more opportunities to sort of get down in and inform people at a younger age about what's out there. Do you know, I remember, just because I live in Brooklyn, and I had a friend who was a sort of social worker at a local high school, and she invited me one day to like career day to come in, and I didn't really know what to expect. And I got to career day, and it was like me and ROTC, and just to have something that I could talk about that was, I mean, they had no idea about theater or about design or about any of that stuff. And you know, I always hope that in those few moments that we just talked about, I might have inspired somebody to think differently about.
I love that. And this conversation was really inspiring. And I do hope that those out there watching will, you know, feel inspired. And, you know, thank you to you all for for sharing your insight and your experience. And most of all, thank you to Array, and thank you to everybody for helping put this together. So thank you all so much for that incredible conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.